Hello and welcome to Belgian Diecast Restorations. My name is Johan and this is the shabbiest looking car in my collection. This Matchbox 32B Jaguar E Type came in a huge eBay lot I bought mostly for parts, but since the model looked complete, it ended up in my restoration bin. It was mainly issued in a dark red metallic color and was one of the few Matchbox models that came with spoked metal wheels, like the Ferrari Berlinetta I did in another video. What we see isn't just playware. The car looks like it was found somewhere in the corner of a basement behind the washing machine. The paint is mostly gone and replaced with what looks like a mixture of paint specks and corrosion. The black paint on the bottom plate has flaked and there are also traces of corrosion. The window unit is dirty and cloudy and it's hard to see if it's damaged, so I'll need to polish it up before I can see if it's still salvageable. Like the Ferrari Berlinetta in my earlier video, I will try to restore this Jaguar as close as possible to its factory state. So let's get right into it. Like the Berlinetta, this Jaguar is a fairly simple model with no opening doors. The car is held by two large rivets. I drill them out until the bottom plate comes away. The axles are not bent, just some tiny flecks of rust. This brings up my hopes that the corrosion might not be as bad as I fear. The spoked metal wheels are in good condition, but they are dull and had an encounter with glue at some point. I grind off the axle ends to take off the wheels, as the bottom plate will need to be stripped and repainted and the wheels will need to come off anyway to be able to clean and polish them. The body and the bottom plate go into the caustic soda to remove what's left of the paint. With the paint removed and the body polished, we can assess the state of the casting. As I feared, there is some pitting from corrosion, but it's not too bad and I'm confident that I can minimize the damage. I rub down the casting and the bottom plate using wire wool. This takes away most of the roughness. Since there is still some minor pitting on the casting, we'll need a thick primer that will fill most of the imperfections. But before we can start painting, I drill a 1.5mm pilot hole in both rivets and tap a 2mm screw thread. I use Motip 1K Grey Automotive Primer to give the model a first coat. After the primer has dried, I can have a better look at what work needs to be done. As we can see, there are still some small and even larger pits in the casting. The bottom plate is in a worse state, but once assembled that won't be visible, so I won't bother with that. To remove the pitting from the casting, I use Italeri model putty, which is quite a liquid putty. This allows me to brush the putty over the pitted surfaces like paint. After about 45 minutes the putty has hardened and is ready for sanding. I sand the putty away down to the metal, leaving the pits filled. A final wet sanding makes the surface smooth. Not perfect, but a lot better. Now we can really start painting. I put on a second and third coat of primer, which will hopefully fill the imperfections that were left over. Of course, we are never going to get that casting perfect again. Once the primer has dried, I apply 2 coats of Tamiya TS95 Pure Metallic Red. This is a rather dark metallic color, which is close to the original metallic paint of this model. I also used this color on the custom paint job on one of the Matchbox field cars I did earlier. The bottom plate is sprayed with Motip High Gloss Black. Finally, the paint is sealed with AK Interactive Gloss Varnish. The original model didn't have any detailing, and since I'm doing a restoration and not a custom paint job, I leave it like the good people at Lesney intended. As the paint dries, it's time to address the other parts. The interior gets a good scrub with a toothbrush and window cleaning liquid. The window piece has suffered a lot, and it's hard to see if it's still usable. I wet sand it with 1200 grit sandpaper, then move up to 2000 grit. After polishing the window unit with polishing compound for car headlights, it looks factory fresh again. It's at this point that I notice a tiny crack in the top of the windscreen. It's only when wiping the window unit with window cleaning liquid that I also notice a second crack in the side window. That's when I decide to use a third-party window unit instead. The wheels get a 60-second bath in hot water. This softens the tires and makes it easier to remove them. Next, the spoked metal wheel hubs and the axles get a bath in household vinegar before I polish them with the wire brush. Then the metal wheels are put on an axle and are also wire brushed to a mirror shine. With everything cleaned up and painted, it's time to reassemble the model. I attach the tires back to the newly polished wheels. Then the wheels are attached to the base with the original axles. I use a small hammer to flatten the axle ends, keeping the axles firmly pressed against the bottom plate. First, I drop the new window unit in place. And finally we can close the model up with the bottom plate and the two screws. I think you will all agree that this model has come a very long way. It wasn't just shabby or play-worn, it was beyond awful and the kind of toy that would get tossed in the bin. But here it is, back in its factory state. The new window unit doesn't fit as well as the original, as is often the case with third-party parts, but nevertheless this car looks great. This was a very challenging restoration with the corrosion, and there's always room for improvement. But I can't say I'm disappointed with this restoration. So that's another one for the books. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring that notification bell. More restorations are coming up. See you in the next video.